What's up, everybody? It's me, Caius, and I'm back with a little bit different of a video. I've never reviewed a movie before on video, but I figured I'd give it a try. And today we're gonna cover Mortal Kombat 2021. Now, before we start, um, I will say that Mortal Kombat has probably been one of my favorite video game franchises, and in forms of lore and stuff like that has been one of my favorite things to discover over the years. So as a kid, I owned all the games: Mortal Kombat 1, 2, 3, Ultimate 3. Eventually got Trilogy. We got the Sub-Zero Mythologies, the Special Forces games. I had them all. The PS2 era games. Eventually 9, 10, and 11. And I'm a big fan. And while there are faults with the story, and there are parts of the story that are stale, it is something I'm always excited when there's a new announcement. So when the movie got announced, I was super excited. I'm like, okay, people saw the first movie, they know it's a classic. It's a cult classic. People love that movie, including me. And then there's Annihilation, which as a kid I loved, and then you realize it's a terrible movie when you grow up. So I was like, there's no way, in my eyes, it could be worse than Annihilation. But I think it's gonna be hard to ever beat that first movie. That first movie just did so much right, other than fatalities, which when you watch it, you really don't even mind because the movie's just so captivating. So I had high hopes for this movie, to be honest. And then I saw the trailer, I was like, oh shit, this could be really good. And the trailer looked dope, but HBO picked it up. It's gotta be promising. So I'm kind of going to go through the movie step by step. This is spoilers, by the way, so there are spoilers. We're going to go through it step by step. I'm going to kind of give what happens and how I felt about it. I've watched it 4 times now, so I watched it twice the first day. I watched it 4 days after that, and I watched it just 2 days ago with the family because they wanted to see it. So I've seen it multiple times, and definitely my hype and the score I initially would have gave it have gone down a little bit. But I will say this before anyone says anything. Annihilation is not a better movie. This movie is not bad. It's not great. It's not that good. It's not bad, though. It's right in the middle. For most people, I believe. So, the movie starts, and you're getting the whole Hanzo Hasashi in his village. He's there bringing water back, comes up to his son, Jubei, and his wife. And you hear a baby crying. And right away, Hanzo's son says he wants to go in and talk to his sister. I'm like, oh, they gave Scorpion a daughter in this one. I'm like, that's different. That's cool. It's all for it. Scenery's cool. The guy they got to play Hanzo's cool. I love him. He's from The Last Samurai as well. Love him in that movie. And it's all nice and happy and everything's going good. And then you know something bad's gonna happen. So he ends up going down to the river to get more water. And his wife and son go inside to comfort the baby. And then she makes a comment that, why is it so cold in here? Now, as a fan, you know right away, probably means Sub-Zero's nearby. You just have that feeling. So things are going fine. They're checking on the baby. They're covering it. And then you just see a guy get knifed right through the wall of the house. And I'm like, okay, we saw that. The trailer looks cool. And you hear, battling outside. And then Bihan enters. And he's one of the best parts of this movie. Every time he's on the screen, I'm fucking terrified. And he's kind of intimidating this family. Asking where Hanzo is. Kind of intimidating the kid a little bit. And what's cool is you start to see his, ice effects on his hand. But he's, bleeding. Which makes me believe that without having the mask, and he's not the persona of Sub-Zero yet, he's probably very early in his training. And he's still learning to control his ice. He knows how to use it, but not at the cost of his own constitution. And I feel like if you ever watch Mortal Kombat Conquest, which is a prequel TV series that aired in the 90s that revolves around the Great Kung Lao and an earlier Sub-Zero, you kind of see that same thing. His initial freezes always take a lot of stamina out of him. So I kind of like that they're doing that. And over time, he will learn to control that, where it won't drain his stamina, and in this case, won't make him, inflict self-harm. So It cuts away after he starts like playing with ice in his hand, and then you hear the screams. Hanzo comes back and he sees his wife and son frozen together, impaled through like their chest, and they're just dead. And it's much like the Mortal Kombat Legacy miniseries we got on YouTube. It's very much like that, and I like it. I think it's a great intro. It's a great story. And before you know it, ninjas start to surround Hanzo after he has like a brief moment to like apologize to his wife for not protecting him. And the fight scenes are awesome. Like he freaking decimates these ninjas, throws a sword into one ninja's back, cuts off another guy's arm, puts a sword through a guy's head, and then that's when you see the improvise where he goes and grabs a rope and ties it to the garden tool, and that's where we get the Hanzo little spear, and he takes up some more guys for that, and then you just get this big cry of Bihan. And looking over, you just see Bihan sitting there, and they start talking how like Bihan wants to eliminate his clan, and Hanzo says he's gonna kill him. And what's really cool, what I like, and this is something you're gonna miss if you're not a fan, Hanzo is strictly speaking in Japanese. He is part of a Japanese clan known as the Shiraryu. And then you got Bihan over here. He's multilingual, so sometimes he speaks in Japanese so they can understand him. He does it with the wife and kid earlier too. But then sometimes he just speaks in Chinese. Just to like kind of fuck with him a little bit. And there's even a point where Hanzo's like, I may not understand your words. And then they start fighting. And the fight's pretty good. You get some back and forths. And as you expect, I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Bihan wins. And eventually delivers a killing blow into his shoulder up here in one of the arteries. I forgot what it's called. And, yeah, he wins. I mean, in most continuities, it's Sub-Zero kills Scorpion, or kills Hanzo. Scorpion is reborn. Scorpion comes back and gets revenge. That is most iterations of Mortal Kombat, and that's how it's been. So, in my eyes, Bihan is a superior fighter. Now, one interesting thing I will say is you see that from the trailer, you see that dragon tattoo on the arm, and we'll kind of give more context onto that later, because there's more that's provided later, and I can come back to that, as well as like what I think Bihan's motives are, like why he kills him. I don't think he just blindly kills Shiraryu. I believe there's someone behind it, and we'll get behind that in a little bit later. But he kills him. He says for the Lin Kuei, so it could have been just a mission for the Lin Kuei, and walks away. Next thing you know, you hear the baby cry, and then like almost like a burst of like second wind breath. Hanzo gets back up, and he tries to crawl over. He falls over, turns into like a thing of fire, and just disappears. And you're like, oh shit. Okay. And then you got Raiden pop down. And Raiden goes over, here's the crying baby, picks him up, and leaves. And that's the start of your movie. And it's a very captivating intro, and it gets you so hyped for the movie, because you're like, damn, if it's all going to be like this, we're in for a treat. So, it then gives you, like, a very brief, like, paragraph describing, like, Outworld and stuff like that, and, like, a prophecy that they're talking about. And I think they overcomplicate it. And then it just, like, jumps to modern day. Like, you went from the 1600s to modern day. And they're talking about, like, a 10th tournament. And here's one thing I will say. For people that don't know Mortal Kombat, there is a Mortal Kombat tournament every 50 years. So they do one, it concludes. And then they have to wait 50 more for another one, and then 50 more, and then 50 more, and then 50 more, and then 50 more, and so on. Based on the timeline, when they're saying this is the 10th tournament, and that you learn that the marking is linked to these people that are to compete in the tournament, which also Hanzo has, you'd have to guess that Hanzo was in the era of, like, somewhere I'd estimate the second or third tournament happening, and he was probably going to be some kind of fighter. So we fast forward, like, almost, yeah, it is about that. It's about 400 years. So yeah, I'd be around the second tournament where Hanzo's at. 400 years, and we see this new character, Cole Young, the worry that everyone was worried about because it's a brand new character, and he's an MMA fighter. And you know, you find he's just like one of those fighters that's kind of used if there's no other fighters available to be a punching bag, pretty much. Like, they need to fill the fight. So he comes in, he's filling a fight for $200, gets in the ring, fights, trades some good blows with this guy. It's a UFC cage match. And there's like a point, he has a point to do an uppercut, and he just does it. And like his daughter's even screaming it, which you learned it's his daughter. Does an uppercut. But doesn't want to do it. And then he ends up losing, he just tap out. And you're like, oh shit, they're trying to give us like a real Cell story from like no fighter to fighter. Like, they're trying to get you to feel like Cole there. Like, you're brought into this world eventually. But sadly, it doesn't portray as the movie goes on. So, he loses, he goes back. His daughter makes like a little friendship bracelet, like a warrior bracelet. Puts it on. We get the first like real intro to Jax. He kind of comes up and he makes a comment like, oh, you're the guy that took the belt from Eddie Tobias. For people that don't know, John Tobias and Ed Boon made the game. They just put the names together. It's kind of like Noob Saibot, which is the two names backwards. They tried to throw in a little quip, which is cool. And you learn that Jax kind of knows he has the marking, so he's probably tailing him at this point. And then he sees it. They try to explain it's a birthmark. Cole has it right on his chest right here. And he reveals like a marking of the dragon. And then Jack's like, oh, well, ain't that something? And he's like, see you around, champ. And so far to this point, you're still in the movie. The movie's great. Like, it has so many places to go. And then they're getting like ice cream after his UFC match, back with the wife and the kid. And you see it start snowing. They're like, it's July. And I'm like, oh, we know what that means. And then you just see everything freezing over. And you see Sub-Zero starting to like freeze the moisture in the air and start raising it like in icicles and like hail. And here's what I'll say. I know he's a ninja and he probably should be more discreet. And he's an assassin technically. Like, you wouldn't want to give yourself away. But I feel like at this point, he's just so overconfident that he's not worried about these guys. Because you got to remember now, this is the same Bi-Han from 400 years ago. Now, people go, how does a mortal live that long? Well, my theory on it is the cryomancy. So, Sub-Zero's race, the people that become, like, the Sub-Zero and conjure the ice, are known as cryomancers. So, I don't know if they have a natural, like, extended life. But I imagine it works much like a Demolition Man when you get cryomancied, or, like, in Captain America, what happens to Steve Rogers where he gets frozen, that it just doesn't let them age. Like, he's just able to survive and not age. And I'm sure it gives him, like, extra constitution on, like, taking hits. And that's how I've always seen it, so I'm just going to say that's probably what happens. So he has, like, 400 years of probably training that nobody else has, because you can imagine the amount of people he's killed since then. So he appears to be hunting people with the mark. So, you know, he's somehow tied into the enemy forces of Mortal Kombat at this point. And he just raises this hail into the air and just starts dropping it, bombarding on people. Jack spins around, tells him to get in the truck so Cole and his family get in. And that's where he gets the reveal where Jack shows he has the tattoo as well. And he tells him it's not a birthmark, that they've been chosen to fight. And I'm like, sweet, you get this cool little chase scene. And then you get the part where just Sub-Zero just standing in front of the car. So Jax name drops Sonya, tells Cole to go over there, they'll explain everything. And Jax comes out with like some kind of shotgun, it looks like. And unfortunately, if you saw the trailer, this part gets spoiled for you, and that's where the trailer does wrong, I think. Cole escapes, and Jax chases him in. You get a really cool fight scene. It's a lot of Sub-Zero winning, but Jax getting in some shots. You get Sub-Zero freezing the gun and breaking it, just like in the trailer. You can see some of the cool effects that they had in this movie. And then you just get some really cool stuff, like him freezing his neck to hold it in place, then slapping it, and then like freezing his arms and like rendering him useless for a second. And then we get the famous breaking his arms by freezing them. And it looks great. It's sweet. Anyone who's played the games knows he gets his arms broken. Now by 3 different characters. Well, this is technically... because Noob Saibot, I think, does it once. which is technically Sub-Zero. So Sub-Zero does it, and then we have Ermac in one iteration that does it. So it's like he gets his arm shattered, he gets pushed off and left for dead. But anyone who knows what's going to happen later in the movie. His wounds are still cauterized by the ice, so he's not going to bleed out. Missing his arms sucks, but that's just the story of Jax. We then get some, like, shot of Outworld, and I don't like the look of it. It's too sunny. They went for more of that MK10 Outworld after, like, things have been saved. I've always been a fan of the darker Outworld from, like, the first movie, or, like, I even think some of the earlier games showed it much darker. I just don't know. I just don't like it. I always had a sense that Outworld was a dark and mopey and dreadful place. And it just looked too sunny. And you get the scene with, like, Melina. You get her first look. And again, I don't like the bruising. They should have just put a mask on her and she'd be fine. Give her a purple mask. Literally solves all the critique probably I have with her at that point. And they're pretty much told, like, we're going to break the rules. We're not doing a Mortal Kombat tournament, which is when you start to learn this is probably a prequel. This isn't even Mortal Kombat. This is a prequel to Mortal Kombat, like a slight prequel. And they're told to break the rules, that the Elder Gods won't do anything, and that they want to stop a prophecy where the blood of Hanzo Hasashi and those with him will win the next tournament. And in Mortal Kombat, even though they lost 9 in a row, if they win one tournament, it does a full reset. That Outworld would have to win 10 more tournaments in a row, which is 500 years of Mortal Kombat. And it's something they don't want to have to deal with. So they're like, you know what? The Elder Gods won't do anything. I'm not so opposed to that. It kind of shows that they're going to call the Elder Gods bluff. So let's see if they invade. I'm like, okay. You know, we'll see how it goes. So at this point, you see Shang Tsung a couple times. It's really hard to be sold on him after you have Kerry Tagawa. I hope I pronounced his name right. He's just Shang Tsung. He's just Shang Tsung. And I tried my best to give this guy more of an opportunity in my eyes. It's just hard. Like, he just didn't do anything. He was just boring. Like, he just pretty much barked orders and never did anything in his own hands. For the most part. And it's like, okay. So they're gonna send someone else. They make a comment like, "Send the reptilian." Is it Sizor? So they had to name him. They could just say send reptile. So it's just like adding more complication where it's not needed. And it cuts back to Cole and his family saying he needs to go find Sonya to make sure they're safe. And he drives down there, finds her place in Gary, Indiana. It's a dump, and he fights Sonya, and Sonya beats him. And then she sees the bark. And what I will say about this Sonya, I like her the most out of all of them. She's not annoying. I feel like Sonya is always too much of a hard ass. This one is a hard ass, but she's also got that compassion, like, mixed in really well with her character. And you'll see that through the whole movie. So Sonya starts walking Cole through, and she gives her the history of the Mortal Kombat. There's a tournament, and there's different races. You get, like, a cool little cameo Nightwolf and a bust of Kotal Khan. And you kind of learn very little bits and pieces of this tournament. Cole's skeptical, of course. Kind of doesn't get it. But he's willing to listen to a degree. And then you get, like, the power going out. And you see, like, acid. And you see, like, the invisibility. Like, oh, that's Reptile. Now, anyone who knows we didn't get Ninja Reptile. Which I'm not that worried about. If they want to do... My thing is... By doing a beast reptile, you're telling the audience very quickly, like, no, the shit they're gonna fight is not always humanoid. It could be something as crazy as a lizard. So I looked at it like that, and I was like, okay, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to show that Outworld, I mean, they have a man who can freeze ice, but he's still mortal looking. He still looks like a man. This is a completely different thing, where they're like, holy fuck, they have access to, like, half-dragons, they have access to all these things. And this tells the main characters quickly, like, yeah, that shit Sonya's been reading is probably true. So, before this happens, you get a brief introduction to Kano, who, as everyone says, carries the movie. He makes some cool one-liners. I'll save those for people that want to watch the movie, although you should have already watched the movie before you watched the spoiler review, but he makes some cool one-liners, and then the fight begins, and it's okay. It's probably the weakest fight in the movie for me. it's just a bunch of hitting invisibility. Eventually, Kano gets free after being hit by his own knife in his leg, using the acid to break his manacles. And he ends up by fatalitying him again, which was spoiled by the trailer. So it was exciting, because it's like, I already saw it coming. He rips out his heart. It says Kano wins for like the little cool game interaction. You're like, okay. So next thing you know, they strike a deal. I'm not going to go too much into that. To find Raiden's temple, because Kano knows where it is. And they start walking the desert after taking a plane. And you get the first appearance of Liu Kang, who Kano starts walking aggressive towards him, and he gets fireballed. And I'm like, oh shit, that fireball looked dope. And then you get the Liu Kang intro, and Sonya's like, you're one of the champions. And he's pretty much saying, like, yes, I'm here to gather the remaining fighters. And, yeah, they more or less, Kano comes in. And this is where you kind of learn that Kano is your point of view in the movie, not Cole. Because Kano's like, how'd you shoot a fireball in your hand? Am I gonna learn to do this? Like, he's never seen this shit before. So, you start to feel more for Kano than you do most of the characters. They eventually go back to the Shaolin Temple. And you see Jax. He's fine. They're doing some repairs on his, like, they're trying to like make him like makeshift arms out of metal. I'm like, okay, they're gonna give him the full metal squad here. Cool. So I'm like, okay, that part's cool. And what I will say is the chemistry between Sonya and Jax is always great. Even like here, you could tell like the actress who played her put a lot of thought into it and a lot of effort, and you could see the care that she has for Jax. And it's great, because they should be close. They've trained together, they were military together, special forces. And, they eventually meet Raiden, and I will just say I don't like this Raiden. I get it. I get Christopher Lambert was too comedic, maybe for some people's taste. But this one's just an asshat, and Raiden is, like, somewhere in the middle. Like, he's still compassionate. He's not an asshat. And he's treating his fighters like shit, which I just don't like. He's calling them names, blah, 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 making fun of them. And it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like the whole gladiator thing that's, like, misrepresented. Like, people think gladiators were, like, treated like shit. Yeah, like, yes, they were slaves. They didn't have their freedom. But, while they were gladiators, you better believe they wanted a woman, or they wanted drinks, or they wanted massages, or they wanted to walk around, and they were a champion, and they were, like, what rested on that Lanista making money, the guy that runs their school, he was going to let them do all that. Because in the end, you want to make sure if they're fighting for you, they need to be at high spirits. And I feel like this Raiden just doesn't do that. He's just an asshat. And I don't like him. I don't think I will like him. He like has like one little moment where he gets lighter at the end, and that's it. And it's just, I just don't like him. We'll just leave it at that. So after that, it kind of cuts around, and you get Liu Kang kind of meditating, and then his fire goes out in his hand, and you're like, oh shit. And then Sub-Zero kind of like invades their area, and you get a cool little squabble between Liu Kang and Sub-Zero that Liu Kang loses terribly, and Sub-Zero's about to kill him when you see the hat. And I know it doesn't make sense that the hat is back on the ground, then that he teleports out of. I don't care. It looked so fucking cool. It made an intro to Kung Lao awesome. A character that I'm honestly not incredibly always fond of. I really liked him. And I'm like, sweet. And then you get the gathering of all like the villains like Mileena, Shang Tsung, Sub-Zero, and then you get like your heroes. And then like Shang Tsung's pretty much saying like their souls are mine, but go ahead and kill them and take whatever else you want. And then Raiden comes along and puts up a barrier. I'm like, okay, sweet. So at least he has something he can do to interfere. I'm like, okay, so he can stop them. So we're still going to get a Mortal Kombat at some point, right? We're still going to get a tournament, right? And that's where you realize, like, you're already, like, deep into the film. You're like, there's no time. Like, you realize how short the film is. And then it cuts to them saying they need to train. And they go to this pit. And Liu Kang kind of explains that the mark they had gives them a chance to unlock their Arcana. And their Arcana is pretty much magic powers or special abilities they will unlock through different ways. Some are training. It could be possibly, from what we see later, anger, protecting someone. There's multiple ways to unlock it, and then it kind of takes a form of maybe what the character is harbingering inside them. So they end up going to this pit where they say they're going to train to kind of bring out their arcanas. And Sonya isn't welcome. She's already been scolded by Raiden for not having a mark and told she's a liability, which is fucking dumb because she literally already beat Kano in a fight very easily. And it's like, I don't know. I just feel I feel like the mark thing, it's cool. Like, I don't mind it. It's a way maybe to get those that don't understand, like, why do they have these powers, like, why they have them. That's okay. It's just, I feel like it's too dependent on it. Because I don't think the enemies of Outworld have it. Or I don't think Sub-Zero has it. But technically, actually, Sub-Zero should. Because he killed Hanzo. So I don't know. We don't know if he does. He probably does. It's just not shown. I don't know. This is where the flaw is coming. So we just don't know. They start training. You get Kung Lao and Cole fighting. And Cole wins the first little skirmish. You're like, oh shit. And even Liu Kang's like, he stands up. He's like, oh shit. And they start fighting again, and Kung Lao brings the hat. And I've seen some people disappointed, like, why is he trying to kill him? And I'm like, well, Mortal Kombat is not fair. You just saw your enemies try to attack you. So, honestly, if Kung Lao kills him with the hat, he probably doesn't deserve to be there. You know? Like, he probably doesn't deserve to be there. So he's trying to show him, like, we're just going to throw everything we can at you. And you get the cool little hat throw that cuts his arm, and I'm like, sweet. And then you get the whole, like, Liu Kang freaking... Dude, his actor was ripped. Like, little Bruce Lee, dude. Fucking ripped. And you get the whole, like, sweep spam like they do in the game, and I'm like, that's cool. So, we're still at a point where everything in the movie, in my eyes, was really good. And I was like, damn. We're still there. Still there, believe it or not. Eventually, we get Liu Kang patching up his arm. And for all people have to say about Liu Kang not liking him that much, I liked him because you're taking a character that's been the face of a game and you're turning him into a supporting character. And that's not easy to do, and I actually think they did an okay job with it. Like, when he was telling the story of how he got his mark, like how he was an orphan, and then he got taken in by Bo Raicho, another name drop of a character from the games that nobody likes, but he's dropped. And he was eventually given the name of someone that was a purveyor of, as he puts, valuable things, I think it was. And he says, children. And right there, I was like, oh, shit. And then Liu Kang's like, he had a mark, so I decided to take it from him. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I like that. It's cool. So he kind of explains his arcana as he's, like, fixing up Cole's arm with his fire and, like, some needles. And I'm like, okay. That's cool. And then we get the whole, like, again, Jack Sonya scene, it's great. You feel the closest of their characters, of her pretty much remotivating him. Because he has, like, these little stick arms. You're like, oh, shit. He's got these little shitty arms. And, he's not going to be able to do much with those. But she kind of motivates that you got to keep going. Like, get off your ass, Major, and let's keep fighting. And you kind of get that moment of trust between those two. And I'm like, that's cool. And then you get the whole dinner scene, which this is, as a lot of people say, one of the best scenes in the movie. Just comedic. It's good. You get Kung Lao being Kung Lao. You get Liu Kang supporting him. You get the characters laughing at Kano. And then you get this sense, and I mean, you should have got this, that Kung Lao and Liu Kang realize that Kano's a very angry man, and that they have to push him to anger to maybe unlock his arcana. And they kind of push him, and you just see a laser beam come out of his eyes. One of his moves from the game gets deflected. And then he's all excited. He makes a couple of jokes. And you can see, like, by the smirk on Kung Lao, they knew what they were doing. They were pushing him. And they got him his arcana first. And then you get, like, a little bit more training sequences, which are really short. And probably from here on out, honestly, this is where the movie takes a rapid decline and the movie gets hurt. You get Cole, like, reminiscing about his family, and then Raiden pretty much comes over and just like, you failed to get your mark, so you are a liability. Just go home to your family. Now, I'm torn on this one because, like, I hate it. I'm like, okay, because Cole just gets up and leaves. He just quits. And I'm like, So, he gets up and leaves, and then you got a sense, which I'll say it later, that Raiden knows what he's doing. Like, that's how I took it on my first take of watching the movie. Like, I was like, huh. But we'll get back to that, of that thought, of why I think Raiden did that. And I'm like, okay, our main character leaves. So shortly after that, you get the introduction to a few new characters. You get Cabal, who looks great, but his voice, I can't. It just doesn't fit. It just doesn't fit for me. As soon as I heard it, I couldn't. And then someone told me it sounded like Ronald Reagan. I was done. I was done. I can't see Cabal serious. Then you get Reiko, and that was one of my things before the movie came out. I wanted him to take risks and bring in other characters. But Reiko is done so poorly. Like, they really did him as a brute, like Shao Kahn. And, like, if they look at Mortal Kombat Conquest, again, the prequel, that is Reiko. And yes, he eventually wants to become Shao Kahn. But this is just... He turned him into a barbarian. And he's a general. He's smart. If you're a general, you're smarter than this. And he's turned him into, like, a mindless brute. And again, no offense, he's not a fighter who I think would fight for Shang Tsung. He is Shao Kahn's general. He is there for Shao Kahn. I don't think Reiko would be one of the chosen fighters. He's from MK4, if people care, and Armageddon. This is where, like, Baraka would have, like, suited that role so much better. He makes so much more sense. They are loyal. They're pretty much like lapdogs of Outworld. So he would have been a better choice. So Reiko, I'm disappointed. I saw Natara and I'm kind of excited because I'm like, dude, they're taking some risks. Okay, they're bringing in a 2D era character that, like, nobody's going to remember, but, like, people like me who know, like, everything about the game. Like, okay, we'll see what they do with her. I wasn't 100% sold her, but we'll see what they do with her. I'm like, sweet. Bringing in cool characters. And then they're pretty much told, like, we got to bring down the temple. And Cabal says, I know a guy in there who can get us in. He references Kano talking about how they used to be in the Black Dragon together. You then get Kano kind of Cabal convince Kano to lower the barrier. So Kano goes and destroys the stick of lightning that apparently keeps the barrier that Raiden used, that he just leaves lying around. And it breaks the barrier and everyone invades. Now, at this point, we get a lot of cuts to fights. It's kind of messy, and they're all just short. So I'm going to kind of go by these one by one. And we'll save Cole's for last. So, you get... And keep in mind, Raiden is nowhere to be seen, which is fucking annoying. He's just chilling. Wherever he is, he's just chilling, even though his fighters are getting attacked. And it's like, what the fuck, dude? But... You get, like, a Liu Kang versus Cabal, and Cabal looks great, his moves look great. Everything about him is great but his voice. And the fight commences. Liu Kang struggling to keep up with him, makes sense. You then got the start of, like, Jax versus Reiko, and Jax can't do anything. He has these little arms, he's trying to block this big sledgehammer. There's no fight there, really. And then you start getting Sonya versus Melina, and that fight's probably the best one out of those three so far, and you're like, okay. That's kind of cool. They're fighting, they're doing well. And then you get a moment with Kung Lao, and this is, like, one of the best moments in the movie. You get, like, Natara. You get, like, Kung Lao throw his hat at Shang Tsung. Shang Tsung dodges it. And then, like, they go over and start fighting. Like, back to the other fighting. And then, like, I don't know. It's just all stale, because, like, I'm so, like, enthralled on, like, the Kung Lao part when I think back to it. And then you get, like, Shang Tsung telling, like, Natara, go, my beauty. And she starts flying around and screeching. And Kung Lao kind of does, like, the meditation thing, which is cool. And then she dives at him, and he, like, jumps on her back. And I'm like, oh, shit. And then he brings and summons the hat to the ground and starts spinning. And everyone who plays the game knows it's coming. He's going to saw her in half, like, down the top, all the way down. And he does that, brings the hat back all bloody at him, and goes flawless victory. And it's great. It's fucking great. And I'm just like, I'm so happy because Shang Tsung's annoyed. And then, like, while this is going on, Cole is also having his own skirmish with, like, around his family. Goro invades. And Goro's kicking the shit out of him. And there's a point where his wife gets an axe, hits him in the back. I'm like, oh shit. So she gets backhanded, and then they try to run for the truck. And they get in the truck. And then Cole, who's down, from the bracelet his daughter made him, makes this, like, gold armor around him. Like, huh? Like, okay. I guess. Okay. And, he goes in and gets hit really bad. You see like red energy. I'm like, oh no, they're taking Black Panther's thing. I'm like, this is Black Panther now, which is kind of disappointing because it's like it's been done. I wanted something unique. So he ends up like breaking one of Goro's or like twisting it, and then Goro twists it back, and they start fighting, and then eventually all the energy he takes forms into these Tonfas. And I don't know why it's Tonfas. I'm not going to defend it. The only thing I can think of is there was a part in the barn where he was holding the crowbar, and maybe they thought like that's the last thing he touched. It's manifest it. I think it's like a blunt one and a sharp one. And he cuts Goro's arm, opens his intestines, and then stabs him in the eye and kills him. I'm like, oh shit, okay. Didn't hate the Goro fight, didn't love it. It was okay. And then Raiden finally shows up and brings him back and like tells Bihan like this is the Hasashi bloodline and like thank you for helping my fight against Arcana, which is where I think, as stupid as it is, Raiden assumed they would send someone after Cole, and he knew if his family was in danger that Cole would react and unlock his Arcana. That's the only thing I crossed my mind in the movie, so I'm like, maybe it's stupid, but it happened, and we just have to go with it. So they get back. And then Raiden starts to teleport them out, and instead of being a real fucking smart guy and teleporting everyone else out first, he just does it all at once, and apparently you can be knocked out of it. So Cole gets knocked out by Sub-Zero, so Kung Lao jumps out to help him. And knocks Sub-Zero away, and then Shang Tsung just power grabs him from a distance, chokes him, and starts sucking his soul. And then you hear a scream, and you hear Cabal give a dumb explanation. I don't think that's needed. And Liu Kang is trying to get over there. He eventually does. And then nobody fucking helps him. They just stand there. Cole stands there and then holds Liu Kang back. They just let Kung Lao die. Like one of the best characters in the movie. Just gone. I'm like, what the fuck? And then they eventually get teleported out. And then like you got Liu Kang all sad with the hat, saying they were supposed to die together. And like, it's lost without Kung Lao. Because to him, the great Kung Lao was the last champion. What are you going to do without Kung Lao? And you got Jax like, couldn't you save him? And he's like, I'm forbidden to interfere with Mortal Kombat and blah blah blah. And that's where I call bullshit. This is why I don't like this writing. They're literally breaking every rule and attacking your fighters before the tournament. I think at that point you could zap all of them with lightning. Okay, I think you could do it, and you could have took care of all of them, and then the Elder Gods would be like, well, they broke the rules, you're fine. That's probably what would have happened. But they just, I don't know what it is where, like, Raiden is so fearful of the Elder Gods, but Outworld isn't, because they know they're not going to do shit, but Raiden still thinks they are, and they just don't. Or if they do, it's always late. So, you find out they're in this white screen, like, where the fuck are they? He's like, we're in the void, in a world between our realm, or my realm and your realm, and Shang Tsung can't reach us there. And I'm like, so you're telling me you could have brought everyone here the whole time and forced Mortal Kombat? And he just doesn't do it. And I'm like, okay, so the big whoops there as well. And then Cole kind of gives this speech that they need to keep fighting, and they need to control the fight, kind of dropping a line back when Jax told him he needs to control the fight more. And he says, he's like, Raiden, could you teleport anyone anywhere? So you learn that Raiden can literally just zap anyone, enemies or anything, to certain spots. So it seems there's some kind of tactical choosing of some fights of where they're sent, but like some of them are in Outworld, maybe some are in Earth, I don't know. Which doesn't make sense again. But it's just like, if he could have did that, he could have zapped all those guys away, and zapped them to the void. They would have been fine. And it just bugs me, because it's just poorly written. So eventually they all kind of like do the whole Annihilation thing where Jack's like, I got the score to sell the radio card. I just think of Mr. Edge is mine from Annihilation, and then like Sonya, leftovers are fine with me. I just think of that part, and like, okay. So we get the pairings, and we get Jax vs. Reiko. It's way too short. It's literally Jax like breaking his hammer, Reiko making a stupid face, punching him and immediately stunning him, punching him a couple more times, and then clapping his head. And it's a cool fatality, but you're on the pit. I should end with an uppercut. So maybe not put Jax there and put another fight there. So it's just too short. And for a general of Outworld who's probably served for thousands of years, it's just a bad way to go. And I'm like, okay, way to shit on one of my favorite characters from the game, but okay. They completely shit on him in this movie with the way he's portrayed and how he fights, but okay. So that fight's done. And then we get a Sonya versus Kano, and that fight's probably, again, one of the most interesting ones. It's just a lot of back and forth. Her being smart and tactical and, like, fucking with his eye, making his laser not come out. And eventually it ends in him getting a lawn gnome in the eye. And her getting the mark. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Her fight was decent. I like it. And it was actually a decent length. Her fight was a good length. And then you get, like, Cabal and Liu Kang, and you get, like, Liu Kang getting cut. And he does the bicycle kick and, like, kicks him into quicksand. This is where the tactical thing, I think, came in. Like, Raiden put them somewhere where he knew Liu Kang would get an advantage. And he does his MK2 fatality in style. Looks great. I'm like, okay. Liu Kang got his moment to me. I'm happy. It was short again. Maybe a little bit short of a fight, but we got what we got. Next, we're looking at Melina and Cole. This fight's just back and forth and dumb. And then she just, like, rips open her side. You finally get the teeth, which is where they could have just took the mask off. It would have been so much better. And she goes to bite his Tafa. Then Sonya teleports in, who immediately already has their Arcana somehow, and just shoots a blast. She's like, it's a party gift from Kano. I'm like, so you just immediately got yours. Okay. But, to be fair, based on how Liu Kang told his story, he said he, like, killed the guy, and that's how he got his Arcana. It made it sound like he got his instantly, too. So I'll let that go. Next thing you know, Sub-Zero takes hostage of Cole's family. And you're like, okay, again, their family is just there. Just to be bait, again. And Cole falls in alone. And his family's frozen. And you don't see, like, an impale on them. So I'm like, maybe they're alive. I don't know. And they start fighting. And Cole starts losing. And then he starts getting the blade of Hanzo that Raiden had given him right before this fight. And he tries to stab her with it, and then Sub-Zero starts turning it. He starts grabbing it, and it starts turning red. I'm like, okay, the blood of Cole. I'm like, he's going to become Scorpion. Right? And wrong. You get a spear from behind, and then Hanzo comes back from the Nether Realm, which I'm like, okay, not what I would have done, but okay, he's back. And then they have an epic fight scene where they go back and forth. A lot of cool stunts. Their fight's sweet. And then you got, like, Cole just trying to, like, punch this ice to free his family, but he can't get, like, the power from his suit. And that's all he's doing. He's occasionally getting attacked and forced to stop. And then they end up going in, like, a 2v1. And then, like, they're, like, for the Shirai Ryu. And then you got, like, Hanzo getting frozen and then breaking out and causing, like, a fire nova, which, like, breaks some of the ice. And then his wife and daughter wake up. We're like, eh. And then they eventually finish him. And you get Sub-Zero looking more and more like Noob Saibot towards the end. And you get Fire Breath fatality from Scorpion. And then he kind of says, take care, my bloodline disappears. And then you get all the other fighters come to Cole. And Liu Kang's like, I'll warm you. And pulls out a fire to warm like those frozen people. Or his wife and daughter, frozen people. And then you get like Shang Tsung appearing and saying he'll bring armies next time, and Raiden just zaps him away. And I'm like, see, you could have did that a long time ago, and Kung Lao would be alive. And then they pretty much say, like, they need more fighters. And then it cuts to Cole, like, back at the gym, saying he's done fighting for $200, and then he's going to Hollywood, and the guy's like, who? What the fuck's in Hollywood? And he's like, not what, who? And as a game fan, you know that's Johnny Cage, and then just in case you're not a game fan, they point to a poster that says Citizen Cage, Johnny Cage. And the movie ends. Oh, that last half is hard after the dinner scene. So here's my thing. Movie's too short. In a movie format, you needed about 40 minutes more. You need to add like 3 to 4 minutes onto some of the fights, and you need more to explain some lore. That's where they struggled. Number 2, they had a first-time screenwrite, and they also had the writer of Wonder Woman 1984, which, to me, they're not Mortal Kombat fans. They don't understand it. Number 3, the director did a good job. There was like the Shin X amulet. You even got the murals. I don't know if people saw. There's one with like the half, like the hooded woman, like over her nose, and the guy with the white hair over her body. That's Argus and Delia from Mortal Kombat Armageddon. So that could be like Taven on the table for all we know. So I was like, okay, that's cool. That's someone who knows the game. The special moves, the sweeping, that's all like the director. So maybe he should have wrote the movie, to be honest. If we're getting a first timer, let him be the first time. He knows the lore. So it just seems like the writing just got sloppy. Like that's my biggest problem with it partway through. Like going in for the fights were cool. The beginning was cool. Kano was great. I don't have a problem with the actors except Raiden and maybe Shang Tsung. I think Melina did what she could, but they didn't give her a mask, and I think that hampers her character. I think Kambal's accent was terrible. I thought Sub-Zero and Scorpion were great. Cole, to be honest, I like the actor, and I think he did what he could with the role, but they didn't give him anything to do, really. Like, when someone asked me, give me your top 5 Cole moments, I couldn't even give one. He's just not memorable. It's not that I dislike him, but I don't remember him. And that's watching the movie 4 times. So I feel bad, and I hope they fix that in the new movie. Now, we're supposed to get more movies, as I said. I think I signed up for 4 if it did well, and I think it did well enough, but my thing is, I don't even know if movies were the right play. I think you're better if they would have did little episodes, like episode 1. You give us a 50-minute episode of just Hanzo and Bi-Han, and you explain more. Episode 2, we go forward in the future, and maybe we see Special Forces, how they happen, Jacksonia. And then we get like a spot on the Shaolin Temple. And then we get a spot on like Outworld. And then we get a spot on Cole. And then we get a 1-hour finale, which is just fighting. And I think you have 6 episodes there, 6 hours. You're able to tell all that lore. Because they tried fitting too much into an hour and 40 minutes or an hour 50, whatever it was with credits. It doesn't fit. It really doesn't fit. And it would have been so much better as an episodic format. Now, obviously, the way they set this up, it was set up for a prequel to Mortal Kombat. So I'm guessing the next tournament is going to be a Mortal Kombat. Now, people they can use to fight are actually pretty limited. Like, when you think about it, I don't think they can use the Cyber Ninjas. Reptile's gone. They wasted Reiko. So who are going to be Shang's fighters? I hope they bring Kintaro. I would love to see a Kintaro adaptation. We've never had him in a movie. Would be cool. So I'd love to see Kintaro. I'd love to see Baraka. Maybe a slight teaser to Quan Chi. A slight teaser to Shao Kahn. I don't think we need Shao Kahn in this next movie. And then maybe we bring some Red Dragon in from like 2D games. Like Mavado. Since the Black Dragon failed, bring the Red Dragon. And I think we can go from there. And this is where I come to it. Now, there's going to be people that say, Sub-Zero is a good guy. I thought he was a good guy. I heard that in a lot of reviews, and he's never been a good guy. Bi-Han has always been an assassin that served the Lin Kuei. And there isn't a variant where he wasn't a bad guy. Yes, in Mortal Kombat like 9, 10, 11, the reboot, you learn that it wasn't Bi-Han that killed the clan. It was Quan Chi using the Lin Kuei and maybe posing like Sub-Zero, as you saw in like Mortal Kombat Legacy, to kill his clan, and then Scorpion kills the wrong person. But it doesn't mean he's not a bad guy. He's still a bad guy. He's an assassin. They just decided to make it, he's more of a bad guy, and he did the job himself. Now, granted, that could totally mean Quan Chi hired the Lin Kuei. We don't know that. That could be Shang Tsung hired him to start clearing out the marks as of 400 years ago, mid-tournament. Like two tournaments are in. And Hanzo was set to fight, and Bi-Han was sent by Shang Tsung. We don't know. All that is still open for interpretation. But I'd like to see more time on the fights. I'd like to see more from Cole if he's going to be in these movies. He needs a bigger role. I also don't want to see it be always Cole saves the world. I think we're bringing Johnny Cage. I think Johnny Cage should get his moment. And honestly, I think Liu Kang should kill Shang Tsung. I think that doesn't need to change. I think he killed Kung Lao. I think Shang Tsung should get it. Like, they kind of made it look like Liu Kang felt like he avenged him by killing Kabal. No. He's not the one that killed him. he should get his moment to fight. And I would like to see that. But that's pretty much my synopsis and review of the movie. If you're asking what I'd give it, so when I first watched it, you're gonna hate me for this, I gave it a 9 out of 10. And that's because I was just so enthralled. It's the first time watching it, and you're like, oh, they did all this cool shit. And then you watch it a second, I'd be like, oh, damn. And then I watch it a third time, and it's hard to even watch past the dinner scene. And the fourth time, it's like the dinner scene is the only, like, big climax again. And you're like, okay, I don't care about the second half of the movie. I give it like a 7. 7's generous, but I would give it a 7. Because I think the director tried to bring it back. I feel like knowing that it was a first-time writer, knowing it was Wonder Woman 1984 writer on top of that, knowing that we didn't get a great Raiden or Shang Tsung, knowing that there were some plot holes in the movie just written all over the place, but the special effects were great, the fighting was great, Kung Lao was great, Kano was great, Sub-Zero Scorpion stuff was great, Jax was cool, Sonya was good, even Liu Kang I liked. Give it a 7 out of 10. That's my review. I hope you guys appreciate it. That's what I have to say about the movie. Hopefully the next one takes a different approach. At least it's longer, or they go episodic. Have some fun with it. And as a true fan, I'm just looking forward to seeing more. So, thank you for the movie being made at least, and we hope the next one's better. With that, I am out. Take care. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you all.